Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're diving into the world of Sia,
Ooh, fun.
that powerhouse vocalist,
Hmm.
who's as well known for her philanthropy as she is for stirring up controversy.
Right, right.
I mean, we're going beyond just the catchy tunes today and really going to try to examine a question that's been swirling around her for years. Is she genuinely using her fame to change the world? Or is it all a carefully crafted act?
Yeah, it's a fascinating question, especially in a world where, the line between genuine altruism and savvy self-promotion
Okay.
can be incredibly blurry.
Oh, absolutely.
We'll be digging through articles, social media posts, even a bit of Sia's own words to see if we can try and unravel this enigma.
Okay, so let's start with something that seems undeniably good.
Yeah.
Sia's 8-year history of gifting money to Survivor contestants,
Yeah.
totaling over $1 million.
Yeah.
Seriously, who does that?
It's definitely unusual. From 2016 to 2024, she basically had her own unofficial award, the Sia Prize, where she'd pick her favorite players each season, often the underdogs, the compassionate ones, and surprise them with cash after the finale.
And it wasn't just a small token either. I mean, the amounts varied from like $14,000 to a whopping $100,000.
Yeah.
In fact, she made headlines back in season 32 when she was so moved by contestant Tai Trian's love of animals
Oh, yeah.
that she spontaneously offered them $50,000 right there on the live reunion show. And then she topped it off by donating another $50,000 to an animal charity of his choice.
Wow. It was a defining moment, I think, for Sia's public image. It cemented her reputation as this incredibly generous, almost whimsical benefactor. But it also raises the question, was it genuine altruism or a brilliant PR stunt?
Right, because on one hand, Sia has been a very vocal animal advocate for years. She partnered with the ASPCA back in 2017 for a pet adoption PSA, and she's constantly using her platform to promote animal shelters and adoption events. So this could easily fit into a pattern of authentic concern for animal welfare.
That's a valid point, and it's worth noting that in recent years, Sia has become more open about her own personal experiences. She revealed in 2023 that she's in recovery for alcohol addiction, and in 2022, she announced that she was diagnosed with autism.
Oh, wow. These revelations, I think, add another layer to understanding her actions, as they could be fueling her desire to help others facing similar challenges.
That makes sense. It's like maybe she's using her fame and fortune to create positive change in areas that are personally meaningful to her. But then we get to the music controversy.
Yep.
And things take a sharp turn.
Ah, yes. The 2021 film. That ignited a firestorm of criticism, especially within the autistic community. The backlash was primarily focused on her decision to cast Maddie Ziegler, a neurotypical actor, as an autistic character.
Which, on the surface, seems like a missed opportunity to showcase autistic talent, right?
Yeah.
And critics didn't hold back. They pointed out that the film relied on harmful stereotypes and perpetuated this idea of autistic people needing to be fixed rather than accepted for who they are. Precisely. And then there were those scenes depicting restraint techniques, which many autistic people and experts condemned as dangerous and potentially traumatic. It seemed like Sia's vision for the film clashed with the realities of autistic experiences, and she was accused of prioritizing her artistic choices over authentic representation.
And how did Sia respond to all of this? Because this wasn't just a few negative reviews. This was a wave of criticism from the very community she was supposedly trying to represent.
Her initial response was not great. She went on the defensive, pushing back against the criticism on social media, and even claiming that she had tried working with nonverbal autistic actors, but found it unpleasant and stressful.
Ouch. That definitely rubbed a lot of people the wrong way, because it sounded like she was prioritizing her own comfort over the needs and perspectives of autistic people.
It did, and it further fueled the perception that she was more interested in controlling the narrative than in genuinely listening and learning. However, she eventually issued an apology and agreed to remove the restraint scenes from future releases of the film.
Okay, so an apology. That's a step in the right direction, right? But was it a genuine change of heart or a calculated attempt to quell the controversy? Because, let's not forget, this all happened after music received 2 Golden Globe nominations.
The timing of her apology was certainly interesting. It led some to believe it was motivated by damage control, rather than genuine remorse. And to complicate matters even further, she had partnered with Autism Speaks for the film, an organization that, while having a large platform, has faced its own share of controversy within the autistic community.
So we've got Sia, this seemingly generous soul giving away huge sums of money on one hand, and then on the other, we have this film that was widely criticized for being insensitive and potentially harmful. It's like trying to reconcile two completely different versions of the same person.
Exactly. And it's this dissonance that makes analyzing Sia's actions so intriguing because it forces us to ask, is there a common thread here? Is there an underlying motivation that connects her philanthropy to her missteps?
It's a puzzle, for sure. And to make things even more perplexing, after 8 years of gifting money to Survivor contestants, Sia quietly ended the Sia Prize after season 45 in 2024. No big announcement, just a subtle confirmation from the show's host, Jeff Probst.
And that raises an important question. Why now? Was it a personal decision? Or could it be related to the backlash she received for music? Did she retreat from this very public act of generosity to avoid further scrutiny?
It's a curious development, especially considering the last recipient of the Sia Prize. Contestant Katura Top seemed genuinely grateful for the $100,000 gift. But the quiet ending of this 8-year tradition leaves us wondering if it marks a shift in Sia's approach, a turning point in her public persona.
It's definitely a thread we need to pull on. So we've got Sia the generous benefactor, Sia the animal advocate, Sia the controversial filmmaker. Are these separate pieces of a puzzle? Or are they all part of a larger, more complex picture?
That's what we're here to figure out. And believe me, this deep dive is just getting started. We'll be back after a short break to dissect the music controversy in more detail and explore whether Sia's actions ultimately align with her stated intentions. Welcome back to the deep dive. We're in the midst of untangling the complex web that is Sia's public persona so far. We've seen a blend of seemingly genuine philanthropy and some pretty controversial choices. Now let's dissect the music film a little further, because that seems to be a major turning point in how people perceive her.
Yeah, it's definitely a pivotal moment in her career, and one that raises a lot of questions about her understanding of representation and her willingness to listen to criticism. Remember, the main issue wasn't just casting Maddie Ziegler as an autistic character. It was the way autism was portrayed in the film.
Right, like relying on outdated stereotypes.
Yeah.
And focusing on the idea of autism as something that needs to be fixed, it felt like a missed opportunity to showcase the diversity and richness of autistic experiences. And then there was Sia's initial response to the backlash, which, to put it mildly, wasn't well received.
It was a defensive reaction that further alienated many in the autistic community, claiming that working with nonverbal autistic actors was unpleasant and stressful, came across as tone-deaf and dismissive of their concerns. It suggested that her comfort and control over the project were more important than authentic representation.
And then there's the whole Autism Speaks connection. This organization has been heavily criticized for not truly representing the needs and interests of autistic people, even though they have a large platform and a lot of celebrity endorsements.
Exactly. Their focus has historically been on finding a cure for autism, which many autistic people find offensive and problematic. They advocate for acceptance and understanding of autism as a difference, not a disease that needs to be eradicated.
So Sia, aligning herself with this organization, further complicated the music situation. It seemed to contradict her supposed goal of creating a film that celebrated and embraced autistic people. It's like she was trying to do good, but ended up doing more harm than good.
It definitely muddied the waters, and it made a lot of people question whether she had a genuine understanding of the issues at hand, or if she was just using her platform to promote her own agenda, regardless of the potential consequences.
And we can't forget about those scenes depicting restraint techniques being used on the autistic character that really ignited a firestorm of outrage, because restraint is a highly sensitive topic within the autistic community. It should only be used as a last resort in situations where there's an imminent risk of harm. And even then, it should be done with extreme care and sensitivity.
Absolutely. Depicting it casually in a film, without proper context or sensitivity, sends a dangerous message and perpetuates harmful misconceptions. It can even be triggering for autistic people who have experienced restraint themselves.
So Sia was facing criticism on multiple fronts. For the casting, for partnering with Autism Speaks, and for including those restraint scenes. It was a PR nightmare. That raised serious questions about her judgment and her commitment to the cause she was supposedly championing.
It did. And it highlights a crucial point in our grifter or gifted analysis. When someone's actions, especially those with a large platform, have the potential to cause harm, it's essential to scrutinize their motives and hold them accountable for the consequences.
Now, Sia did eventually issue an apology and promised to remove the restraint scenes from future releases of the film. She even deactivated her Twitter account for a while, which suggests she was genuinely overwhelmed by the backlash. But the timing of her apology, coming right after the Golden Globe nominations, left many skeptical.
It did, because it raised the question of whether the apology was driven by genuine remorse or by a desire to protect her image and her chances of winning awards. It's difficult to know for sure what was going on in her head at that time, but the optics weren't great.
It's like this pattern keeps emerging. We see these acts of generosity, like the Survivor prizes, that seem impulsive and heartfelt. But then there are these missteps, like the music film, that make you question her motives and her understanding of the issues she's involved in.
It's this push and pull, this back and forth between seemingly genuine good intentions and actions that raise red flags. That makes Sia such a fascinating and frustrating figure to analyze. It's like she's constantly walking this tightrope between genuine altruism and calculated self-promotion. And it's hard to know where one ends and the other begins.
And it's not just about Sia. This whole episode is making me think about how we perceive celebrities and public figures in general. It's so easy to put them on pedestals and assume that because they're talented or famous, they must also be morally good.
It's a trap we all fall into sometimes. We want to believe the best about people we admire, especially those who seem to be using their platform for good. But the reality is celebrities are just people with their own flaws, biases, and motivations. And just because someone does something good, it doesn't mean they're incapable of doing something harmful.
So how do we reconcile these two sides of Sia, the generous philanthropist and the controversial filmmaker? Were they two sides of the same coin, or are they completely separate entities?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And to get closer to an answer, we need to dig even deeper into Sia's story. We need to consider her personal journey, her struggles, and the choices she's made along the way. Because ultimately, understanding a person's motivations requires looking at the whole picture, not just the highlights or the lowlights.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We're wrapping up our exploration of Sia, a figure who has proven to be as enigmatic as she is talented. We've seen the incredible generosity, the passionate advocacy, and the missteps that have left many questioning her motives. So where do we land? Is she a true visionary, a savvy manipulator, or something in between?
Well, that's the question we've been wrestling with throughout this deep dive, and I think the answer, as with most things in life, isn't simple. Sia is a complex individual with a unique blend of talents, passions, and contradictions. It's tempting to try to put her in a neat little box, labeled grifter or gifted, but the reality is much more nuanced.
Exactly. We can't ignore those grand gestures, like spontaneously giving away thousands to Survivor contestants. But then we have the music controversy, which raised concerns about her understanding of representation and her response to criticism. It's this back and forth that makes analyzing her actions so challenging.
Yeah, it's like she's constantly challenging our perceptions, pushing us to examine our own biases about celebrity and philanthropy. One minute she's embodying the spirit of selfless giving. The next, she's making choices that seem tone-deaf and insensitive.
So let's talk about legacy. How will Sia be remembered? As a musical innovator, a controversial figure, a generous benefactor, or perhaps all of the above?
I mean, it's still too early to definitively say how history will judge her. But one thing is certain. Sia has left a significant mark on pop culture. Her music has touched millions. Her philanthropy has impacted lives. And our controversies have sparked important conversations. The question is, what will those conversations ultimately lead to?
That's the crux of it, isn't it? Did her actions ultimately align with her stated intentions? Did she genuinely use her platform for good? Or was it more about personal gain and image management? We've seen compelling arguments on both sides.
And that's why we leave this question in your hands, dear listener. We've presented the evidence, the complexities, the contradictions. Now it's up to you to weigh the information and decide where you stand on the spectrum of grifter or gifter.
Exactly. It's all about perspective. Some might view her as a flawed but ultimately well-meaning individual who is using her platform to make a difference. They might see her missteps as growing pains, a sign that she's still learning and evolving.
Right. And others might see a pattern of self-serving behavior, where acts of generosity are carefully calculated to bolster her image and deflect criticism. They might view her apologies as insincere attempts at damage control, rather than genuine expressions of remorse.
It's a fascinating dichotomy, and speaks to the larger issue of how we as a society engage with celebrity culture. It's easy to get caught up in the hype, to project our own ideals and expectations onto these larger-than-life figures. But we must remember that they are human beings, just like us, with their own complexities and motivations.
It's a reminder that we should be wary of putting anyone on a pedestal. No matter how talented or charitable they may seem, we should engage with their work and their actions critically, asking tough questions and holding them accountable for their choices.
So as we conclude this deep dive, we challenge you, dear listener, to go beyond the surface. Don't simply accept the narrative that's presented to you. Dig deeper. Consider the nuances and form your own conclusions about Sia's legacy and whether her actions ultimately align with her stated intentions.
Because in a world where charisma and controversy collide, it's up to each of us to discern the truth. Are those in the spotlight genuinely using their influence for good, or are they just masters of manipulation? It's a question that requires careful consideration, critical thinking, and a healthy dose of skepticism.
And that's what the deep dive is all about. Join us next time as we explore another polarizing figure, dissecting their motives, their actions, and their impact on the world. Until then, keep those thinking caps on. And remember, not everything is as it seems.